So Rick Santorum went on Hardballs with Chris Matthews, and they were talking about guns, and they were also talking about the Planned Parenthood shooting. So I want to show you a little bit of a clip of that, and then we'll talk about it.
Do you really want people in a clinic to have guns?
Why wouldn't they have? Why wouldn't I believe people should have the right to carry guns wherever they want to carry guns.
You mean a doctor and a nurse in an operating room?
There's a law-abiding people who are there
why
who
would
can protect
but seriously,
each other.
Functionally, you say we could prevent this tragedy if you had people armed. Do you expect people to be armed in a doctor's office?
Where do you think these people commit crimes? They go to places. These people who are ill. They go to places where they know no one's going to have a gun. If you have a, I know that sounds somehow foreign to certain ears, but the fact is that they don't go to places where people are armed. They go to places where people are unarmed.
I don't think it sounds foreign. What I think is weird is when we grew up with Matt Dillon, they'd say, keep your guns at the city limits. There were always ordinances about guns. It's not un-American to think that you have some limits on access.
The problem is the bad guys.
We don't have guns all the time.
The bad guys have guns. That's the problem, and there's no way around that.
Do you support the NRA all the way when it says they want guns in bars where people are getting drunk? They should have a gun with them.
Again,
you're not for that, are you?
I believe that responsible people carrying weapons actually reduces crime in America and saves people's lives.
Do responsible people walk into a saloon wearing a gun?
Many people do. Of course they do. Of course they do.
Hey.
Not everybody who walks into a saloon, Chris, gets drunk. I mean, that's the
some
idea.
do.
Well, some do.
And those guns are loaded.
Again,
Thank you, Rick.
They're not necessarily.
You got to be pro-life about some of this stuff. I mean, carrying guns and booze don't mix.
Well, all I'm saying is that the more people that we have responsibly carrying, the less violence we're going to have in this country.
That's wrong. That's 100% wrong. And look, Santorum said this, right? The problem is the bad guys have guns. That's the problem. Yeah, that is a problem. Great. We do agree on something. The bad guys do have guns. But see, how can you tell a good guy from a bad guy until they actually do something bad? And see, that's sort of the problem. You put guns into the hands of more and more people, there's a chance that some of those good people will turn bad. You know why? Because it's human nature. Some people are good until they go bad. Now, regardless of whether or not you have a history of domestic violence, you can still get a gun in this country. Now, when it comes to Robert Deere, who shot up the Planned Parenthood, he was a responsible gun owner until he shot people. Sort of the problem, right? And even with a history of domestic violence, which he had, he was still able to get guns. So you see, this is where Rick Santorum is going with this, right? You see where he's going. More guns. Let's give more guns. If only somebody had a gun at that Planned Parenthood, that would have prevented it. Right? Right? Oh, wait. There was already a police officer on duty. Was he armed? Yes, he was. And he was also killed, bravely defending innocent people. Well, shit. That kind of destroys your argument. There was already someone at the gun. What, I guess you wanted to arm the nurses too? The doctors? Hell, arm the fetus as well. Guns for everybody. How many more guns does it take before you're safe? How many more? But as I said, Santorum, more guns. If only there had been more guns. If only there had been more guns, then it wouldn't have been so bad. It still would have been pretty bad. But it wouldn't have been as bad. Okay. Right. Sure. Now, in the other part where he asks, where do you think these people commit crimes? They go to places where there aren't any guns. Well, as I just told you, there was a policeman on duty that was armed. He had a gun. It was pretty obvious. Policemen carry guns in America. Yet this guy still went and attacked that Planned Parenthood that had an armed guard. That's strange. They had a guard, a police present. And look, that didn't deter him. The fact that this cop was armed did not do any sort of deterrent action. Had no bearing on whether or not this guy was going to shoot up this place. And see, this whole argument that, well, they're not gonna show up to they're gonna show up to places that are gun-free zones because they're easier targets, right? And they're not gonna show up to places that have armed people there. So if everybody's armed, they're just not gonna show up. That's not true. That's not true. It's not true. Because see, that argument relies on people being rational. A rational person says, hey, you know what? Yeah, no, I'm not going to risk my own life going into this. Obviously, I'm going to I wanted to attack this mall and everything. Or I wanted to attack this Planned Parenthood, to show those libtards who's really pro-life. But now they have an armed guard, so I guess my plan has been foiled. I guess I'll just go to that school next door. No, that's not how people think. Okay, that's not how people think, especially if they're not rational. If you're going to carry out a crime, you're going to go wherever. Now, do some people choose to go after places without guns? Yes. That's true. That has happened. For example, Dylan Roof. He said he was first going to go to the ghetto, but then he's like, never mind. Too many guns there. So instead, he went to a church. There's the exception. Hey, let's be fair. But then once again, you can't really call Dylan Roof a rational person. Most rational people won't shoot up a Planned Parenthood or a black church anyway. We're not dealing with rational humans here. So, this gets to the point of why we are trying to arm more people if this obviously isn't a deterrent. It's the same kind of thinking that people use to defend the death penalty. Oh, it's a deterrent. It's going to deter people from doing crime. Really? Well, if it's a deterrent, then how come people still murder other people? How come we still need a death penalty? Doesn't seem to have deterred very many people. It's the same thing. More guns aren't going to deter crime. We're not dealing with rational people. And if more guns prevented murders, more murders, right? If we had more guns and less crime, well, then wouldn't America, or even the Middle East, for example, be the safest places in the world? Syria is overflowing with guns. Iraq, overflowing with guns. Wouldn't they be the safest places? Since you could defend yourself. No, not exactly. No, they're not safe. And see, the gun issue in America here is an issue of math. It's a math problem. You add more guns, and you will end up with more gun death. Especially, as I said, since you're dealing with irrational human beings. You've heard of crimes of passion, right? Stuff that people wouldn't normally do. But when given the opportunity and the right stimuli, people can flip their lid. That's what they call it. He snapped. He went crazy. Well, you get somebody who snaps and goes crazy, and you get with them within arm's reach of a gun. Well, a lot of the gun murders happen that way, where they just happen to have a gun handy, and they shoot their wives. They shoot their kids, and then themselves. Maybe if they hadn't had a gun there, that moment may have passed, or would have passed, and they would have calmed down and said, oh, boy, I'm glad I didn't do that. It's not effective in 100% of the cases, but it certainly would be more effective than giving everyone a gun. That's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous argument. What Rick Santorum and people like him are doing are advocating a solution that wouldn't actually solve a problem. It would actually create a bigger problem. He wants to arm nurses. And I'm going to point out in the next segment here that Planned Parenthood already has extensive security measures in place already, including armed guards, and that still hasn't deterred anything. And yet he wants to arm more people. Okay. maybe instead of arming these people at these health centers, how about we try to shut down the source of the problem? Maybe try to limit access to violent people getting access to these weapons. And then having these violent people, these violent people get egged on by hate radio that encourages them to do terrible things because they continue to spout lies about places and organizations like Planned Parenthood that it should go to help people. Maybe if we start to clamp down on that problem, I'm not saying the government, but I'm saying we as people, clamp down on that sort of hateful, divisive rhetoric and push back against the lies and encourage our politicians to stop lying about Planned Parenthood and other organizations like this, well, that would be a start.